Okay. Hopefully, I should be audible and visible right now. Hopefully, I should be audible and visible right. Um, Give me a thumbs up if you can see me. Excellent. Got the thumbs up. Fantastic. All right. Fantastic. We're squared away. I can be seen. I can be heard. Guys, I have to report something extremely sad. We will no longer we will no longer be reading from the first edition Animal Farm. We can't. Guys, whenever I open that book, little crumbs fall out of it, and the crumbs are the pages. Whenever I write on books, which I absolutely must, it breaks the page. It just abuses the book. That book has given us all that it can. Yes, I see the tears. I see the oh no. I see the heartbreaks. Listen, we are going. Henceforth, we'll be reading from the authorized edition. It's from the Orwell estate, the first edition Animal Farm, we're going to retire that one. Those of you who were here since we had the first edition Animal Farm book, guys, you'll always be appreciated. And yeah, whenever I open it, it's just like moths fly out, you know, uh, ghouls and spiders and webs. Just, I mean, it's like when you open it, you just get ancient dust that you have to breathe in, and it's the book is not it's not hanging in there. It deserves to be put in a museum of some kind. Yes, I definitely write on my books. I see that in the chat. How's everybody doing? Everybody's week went great. I'm glad that we're here. We have a lot to go over. We have a lot to go over. And guys, this one is not monetized, so there will be no interruptions for your viewing and listening experience. So if you don't mind and if you can afford it, please support the channel by any means that you can. Whether that's sending in a super chat with a question, we address all of those after the live. Whether it's becoming a member, becoming an Epiphany member, an Insight member. Definitely support in any way that you can and in any way that you see fit. So, as a quick recap, before we go into chapter 6, we have to recap chapter 5 with at least 4 points. The first point about chapter 5. Snowball and Napoleon are reaching like this breaking point with their arguments. They cannot keep it together. They're fighting over every possible thing. And specifically the idea of a windmill. So Snowball has this idea about getting a windmill, and then the farm will do great, and then everybody will have warmth, and it'll solve all kinds of problems. And he's even kind of in the flow state as he's drawing up the plans for this windmill. And Napoleon completely hates the idea. He actually pisses on the plans. And there was this very creepy line in chapter 5 that says Napoleon was against the windmill the entire time. And we thought that that was not only on the surface level interesting, but when you look into the depth of what it's meant by that, what does it mean that Napoleon was against the windmill the whole time? What does the windmill represent? The windmill represents the thriving of the animals, right? And so saying Napoleon was against the windmill the entire time gave us kind of a foreshadowing, a little clue from Orwell that Napoleon's intentions were power the whole time. Second, Snowball is exiled. This is another thing, we're kind of recapping chapter 5 for those who are just joining us. Snowball is exiled, and in a very violent and surprising way. This wasn't voted on. He was just chased out by dogs who were secretly being trained by Napoleon to serve only Napoleon. Right. So these dogs chase Snowball away, and now Napoleon has just seized power. Now, not only does Napoleon have the psychological edge over the farm animals, but he also has the physical edge. He has kind of this biological threat where these dogs will tear you apart. I mean, seeing them almost they're trying to bite and rip apart Snowball. He barely escaped. Hopefully, we'll see a comeback from Snowball at some point. Um, the third point about chapter 5, the windmill is brought back. Interestingly enough, when Snowball is exiled, finally there at the end, Napoleon brings back the idea of the windmill as if he wasn't against it the entire time. I mean, that was interesting. Why does he want the windmill? And what's interesting is Snowball wanted it to cause the animals to thrive, right? We don't have any implication that Snowball wasn't a real one at this point. He put himself in harm's way in the Battle of Cowshed. This was a couple chapters back, and he's telling the animals he wants them to learn how to read. He wants them to have more downtime, right, as a result of the windmill. But the reason Napoleon wants to bring the windmill back might be because that makes a lot of farm animals expendable, right? If he has all the machinery necessary to make the farm thrive, that gives him a lot more power over the inhabitants and over the animals. Does that make sense? Um, so, are we ready? Are we ready for chapter 6? I need apples and I need milk. Please, please, I need apples and milk because this causes my brain to function correctly. I can't do this without apples and milk. I need all of it, guys. Even the ones that haven't, I need all access to the orchard. You know, no, listen, I need all the apples. I need the milk. I need the straw. Salute to the chat. Oh, the chat on command with this apples and milk emoji, right? We have to embody the animal farm cult for at least a couple more weeks that we're in this book, guys. Emily one put a bunch of pigs. D said, "Don't be so greedy." Respect, respect. Okay, so chapter 6. Are we ready? Let's go. All that year, the animals worked like slaves. First line in chapter 6. All that year, the animals worked like slaves. Now, what's the difference between slave and like slave? It's kind of an interesting distinction there, right? Thank you so much for the super chat, Amy. We will discuss that right after the chapter. We're answering all super chats. So thank you very much for your support. All that year, the animals worked like slaves. Is it like slaves or is it as slaves? I mean, at this point, they've given up their main sources of nourishment, the milk and the apples. All of that goes to the pigs. They're working harder than they ever have before. They no longer have a vote that was taken away by Napoleon. And they're constantly under physical and psychological threat. So, is it like slavery or is it kind of synonymous with slavery at this point? Anyway, I digress. All that year, the animals worked like slaves, but they were happy in their work. They grudged no effort or sacrifice, well aware that everything that they did was for the benefit of themselves and those of their kind who would come after them, and not for a pack of idle, thieving human beings. Something interesting about this, guys. It says that they were happy in their work. I'm wondering if this is another instance of the untrustworthy narrative. Because when I think, okay, who's happy? Is Benjamin happy? No, Benjamin isn't any more happy than when Jones was around. When we talk about Benjamin all the time, the donkey who just has these cryptic messages like donkeys live a long time. None of you has ever seen a donkey die, right? So Benjamin isn't happy. What about Molly? Molly wasn't happy. As a matter of fact, she ran off. No one has even mentioned Molly in months. Is Boxer happy? Well, I mean, he does have his slogans. I will work harder. Napoleon is always right. But is Boxer happy? It seems like he's gone through a lot of traumas recently. specifically the one at the Battle of Cowshed where he knocked the guy unconscious and thought that he killed him. He's dealing with a lot of internal moral dilemmas, that's for sure. What about the Porkers? The Porkers spoke up for the first time in chapter 5, all trying to tell Napoleon how wrong it is to have chased Snowball off and to just amass all this power for themselves. So, what does it mean here that they're happy in their work? Interesting. They grudge no effort or sacrifice, well aware that everything that they did was for the benefit of themselves and those of their kind who would come after them, and not for a pack of idle, thieving human beings. Guys, it's so fascinating thinking about this. They're saying, uh, at least they're not working for a pack of idle, thieving human beings. But are the ones that they're working for idle and thieving, even though they're not human beings? I mean, look, the pigs don't work. The pigs just have excused themselves from any manual labor, chalking this all up to their mental labor, right? Um, Napoleon has stolen all the apples and all the milk, all the pigs have, right? But their identity, the identity of the animals, has been completely lost in their slogans. They don't even realize that they're still, serving a pack of idle thieving. It's just the human being thing. It's like they're just given pleasure by the most transient things. It's almost like you hear people. I mean, people today have the mentality: I'm willing to be taken advantage of, just not by liberals or just not by conservatives, right? And it's like at some point you're just worshiping a slogan, and it doesn't really matter how you're being treated at the end of the day. Throughout the spring and summer, the book continues, they worked a 60-hour week. And in August, Napoleon announced that there would be work on Sunday afternoons as well. Wow. Working on Sundays. I was when I read this, I did a little bit of research into the day of rest, like the Sabbath day, the Jews in the Old Testament. And one of the reasons, because the Sabbath day law in the Old Testament is really, really stringent. It's like it's actually weird. It's like you're not allowed to plow. I mean, you're not even allowed to pluck things out of the field to just casually eat. You're supposed to avoid all of that. And it dawned on me that the reason that there were such strict rules against labor on the Sabbath is because the ancient Hebrews kind of had an understanding of how difficult it is to actually stop working. Have you guys ever noticed that? For me, I've had to do that too. I've had to recognize, like, man, even when I'm relaxing, I'm kind of working, right? Even when I'm supposed to just be having chill time, it's almost like I'm just preparing for work. Even like the 15-minute break, the half an hour break at work, it's almost like you can use that time sometimes just preparing for work, almost as if the reason for life isn't resting anymore. The reason for life is just work. And so Napoleon saying that there's going to be this Sunday afternoon work, right, is just kind of a subtle transition, right, from working for the sake of leisure into leisure for the sake of working, right? It just kind of flips that idea on its head. But this work was strictly voluntary. But if any animal absented himself from it, he would have his rations reduced by half. Yeah, sounds pretty voluntary, right? Even so, it was found necessary to leave certain tasks undone. The harvest was a little less successful than in the previous year. Pay attention to this part. The harvest was a little less successful than in previous years, and 2 fields, which should have been sown with roots in the early summer, were not sown because the plowing had not been completed early enough. It was possible to foresee that the coming winter would be a hard one. Guys, here's one of the big problems. It seems like where we're going is that Napoleon is not as competent as Snowball. Which one is worse, in your opinion, an evil genius or an evil idiot? Which isn't to say that about Napoleon. I'm not saying Napoleon is an idiot, right? but he doesn't have the genius of Snowball. Which one, according to you, which would you rather live under? And God forbid you live under either. But would you rather live under the tyranny of an evil genius or an evil moron? Which one? If you had to choose, Rose says evil genius. Evil genius. People saying giving me the evil genius. Yeah. Okay, interesting. Because the thing is, I mean, I feel like an evil genius can get a lot more accomplished, and the evil moron might have, it might be easier to overthrow them, but they're also very probably skittish, right? An evil moron is going to push the button, right? Yikes. Um, so the harvest was a little less successful than the previous year. This part actually spooks me because it's telling us that Napoleon, though he wants a lot of power amassed to himself, he doesn't have the competence. He's not a genius. He's not a brilliant guy. So the harvest was a little less successful in the previous year, and two fields which should have been sown with roots in the early summer were not sown because the plowing had not been completed early enough. It was possible to foresee that the coming winter would be a hard one. The windmill presented unexpected difficulties. There was a good quarry of limestone on the farm, and plenty of sand and cement had been found in one of the outhouses, so that all the materials for building were at hand. But the problem the animals could not at first solve was how to break up the stone into pieces of suitable size. There seemed no way of doing this except with picks and crowbars, which no animal could use because no animal could stand on his hind legs. Only after weeks of vain effort did the right idea occur to somebody, namely, to utilize the force of gravity. Huge boulders, far too big to be used as they were lying all over the bed of the quarry. The animals lashed ropes around these, and then all together, cows, horses, sheep, any animal that could lay hold of the rope, even the pigs sometimes joined in at critical moments. They dragged them with desperate slowness up the slope to the top of the quarry, where they were toppled over the edge to shatter to pieces below. Guys, I wonder if you guys are familiar with the myth of Sisyphus. Uh, the myth of Sisyphus, as detailed by Albert Camus. I think it's Camus. You have to do this weird thing. Uh, there's a clever king who's known for angering the gods by cheating death. And the punishment that the gods give him is to roll a boulder up a hill, only to have it roll down again. And then he has to just go down and roll it up again. It's a sign of endless meaninglessness, futility, endless, meaningless, hard labor, which is ultimately futile. It's almost a primitive idea of hell, right? It's going towards what the philosopher Sam Harris would call the worst possible misery for everyone in Sam Harris's book, The Moral Landscape, right? And it's fascinating to me that you kind of have this Sisyphus symbol in what these animals are doing, climbing up this large hill and letting a boulder roll down and doing this slowly, painfully. This is supposed to happen over the course of years, right? So this is a very, very important symbol here. So they dragged them with desperate slowness up the slope to the top of the quarry, where they were toppled over the edge to shatter to pieces below. Transporting the stone, when it was once broken, was comparatively simple. The horses carried it off in cartloads. The sheep dragged single blocks. Even Muriel and Benjamin yoked themselves into an old governess cart and did their share. By late summer, a sufficient store of stone had accumulated, and then the building began, under the superintendence of the pigs. And it stuck out to me that that word superintendence was used. The term supervisor or overseer I believe it initially belonged to the sages in the early Paleolithic transition. And we still have people in our lives that are called supervisors or overseers, or superintendents, right? And it's weird when you look at the etymology of some of these terms, like supervision. It sounds like you're like Superman, like you could see through walls and things like that. Like, why do we still have that name? Like, it was like, oh yeah, he's a supervisor. Well, interestingly enough, the sages in the early Paleolithic transition, paleoanthropologists are learning that groups that had sages with them far outperformed groups that didn't have sages with them. And the reason is that these sages would invent psychotechnology for altering their states of consciousness. And they would do things like hide in caves for a month or dance around fires, inhaling the smoke and uh, covering themselves with animal skins and taking vows of poverty and vows of silence and not eating for long periods of time. And this changed mental state sometimes caused them to think outside the box. That's what you do when you have an altered mental state. You think outside the box. Certain things which weren't salient to you before suddenly become salient. And oftentimes, that thinking outside the box was exactly what was necessary to solve your problem. So that's the reason a sage or a wise person is someone you want to keep pretty close. But in this case, that term superintendent, it's unfortunate because these pigs are really only out for themselves at the end of the day. But just a word kind of about supervision and overseeing. They're supposed to be kind of general problem solvers. But it was a slow, laborious process. Frequently, it took a whole day of exhausting effort to drag a single boulder to the top of the quarry. And sometimes, when it was pushed over the edge, it failed to break. Nothing could have been achieved without Boxer, whose strength seemed equal to that of all the rest of the animals put together. I think that Boxer is the saddest part of this story, right? When it says nothing could have been achieved without Boxer, just imagine if Boxer wanted to stop this whole thing. Imagine if Boxer wanted to shut this whole show down. He's the only one that has the strength to put down the dogs, overthrow the pigs. Uh, but he's dedicated himself to these slogans and symbols. So even he is working against his own interest, right? When he should be the only one able to overthrow the dominance of what's being established. But nothing could have been achieved without Boxer, whose strength seemed equal to that of all the rest of the animals put together. When the boulder began to slip, and the animals cried out in despair at finding themselves dragged down the hill, it was always Boxer who strained himself against the rope and brought the boulder to a stop. To see him toiling up the slope inch by inch, his breath coming fast to the tips of his hooves clawing at the ground, and his great sides matted with sweat filled everyone with admiration. A couple of things. Uh, if it's been a long time since you've read Animal Farm, it might have been a long time since you read Uncle Tom's Cabin. Um, but Uncle Tom, I could see a lot of people maybe comparing Boxer with Uncle Tom. And Uncle Tom is a word that is misused today. And the reason the word Uncle Tom is misused today is because Uncle Tom, when they would do plays, um, uh, you know, and Uncle Tom's Cabin, when they would do the play, Uncle Tom would be somebody who, really is just kind of shucking and jiving for the master. And, he, was really kind of dumb and kind of lazy and kind of scared. But that wasn't what the book represented. If I remember correctly, Uncle Tom in the book was actually really, really brave. Like he would actually put some of his labor in your bag so that you would hit your quota. So he would do more work and then he would share some of his work with you to make it so you didn't get in trouble at the end of the day. That was Uncle Tom. Um, and For better or worse, it just kind of makes me think. Um, but check this out. He fills everyone with admiration. That's a beautiful thing and a sad thing. That's really bittersweet because they want to be like him. He's like their mascot. Everyone looks up to Boxer, and how could you not? This is some of the brilliance of George Orwell's writing, because on the one hand, you want to say about Boxer, it's like, oh man, you're overworking yourself, and you're working for this corrupt establishment, but at the same time, how hard he works takes the burden off of the rest of the animals, and so with that, you kind of got to salute him, right? Um, but it's unfortunate that he kind of becomes a mascot for the rest of the animals. Like, we should work harder. We should put our head to the grindstone and stop overthinking this, right? Now check this out. Here, this one's important. Clover warned him sometimes to be careful not to overstrain himself. But Boxer would never listen to her. His two slogans, I will work harder and Napoleon is always right, seemed to him a sufficient answer to all problems. Uh, Arthur Kessler wrote a book called The Ghost in the Machine, where he calls human beings holons. And by holon, he means that you are not only an individual, but you're a part of a greater whole. And it's important to remember both things and not to neglect either thing. You are an individual and you do need to take care of yourself and look after number one, especially your psychological state. Protect your peace at all times. But also remember that you're not just an individual, you're a part of society. You're a part of this greater thing that we're trying to build together, right? You're a part of the book club, right? So not only are you an individual, but you're a part of a greater thing. Well, what's interesting is Clover is trying to remind Boxer, hey, we understand you're part of this greater thing. You've convinced us, right? You're saying Napoleon is always right. You will work harder. But just remember, you're also an individual. You also need to do some things for yourself. You also need to take a break. You also should probably drink some water. You also should, maybe stop waking up half an hour early to do more work than everyone and getting up later to, you know, take care of you, right? Yes, you're a part of this bigger thing, but you're also an individual too. And he just rejects that. He gives everything up to this cultural identity. But Boxer would never listen to her. His two slogans, I will work harder and Napoleon is always right, seemed to him a sufficient answer to all problems. He had made arrangements with the cockerel to call him 3/4 of an hour earlier in the mornings instead of half an hour. And in his spare moments, of which there were not many nowadays, he would go alone to the quarry, collect a load of broken stone, and drag it down to the site of the windmill unassisted. So, guys, it seems what George Orwell is trying to say here is that the problem is not the lack of power. The lack of power is not the problem. Think about today. Just think about whatever situation we are in today, where there's corrupt leaders, where there's anyone that you think that's in power that shouldn't be in power. The wars, the rumors of wars, escalations, nuclear and AI, and all of the things which subtly threaten us. Right? Orwell is saying the problem is not lack of power. That's a hint. Lack of power is not your problem. Right? Um, we have as much power together as we've ever had in the history of the world, right? Um, so it's just an interesting thing to chew on there. The animals were not badly off throughout the summer, in spite of the hardness of their work. If they had no more food than they had in Jones's day, at least they did not have less. The advantage of only having to feed themselves and not having to support five extravagant human beings as well was so great that it would have taken a lot of failures to outweigh it. And in many ways, the animal method of doing things was more efficient and saved labor. Such jobs as weeding, for instance, could be done with a thoroughness impossible to human beings. And again, since no animal now stole, it was unnecessary to fence off pasture from arable land, which saved a lot of labor on the upkeep of hedges and gates. Nevertheless, as the summer wore on, various unforeseen shortages began to make themselves felt. There was need of paraffin oil, nails, string, dog biscuits, and iron for the horses' shoes, none of which could be produced on the farm. Guys, I'm going to read that sentence one more time and just let me know what stands out to you about this sentence here. Just hear me out. Listen to this sentence. The two sentences. I'm going to go back two sentences. Nevertheless, as the summer wore on, various unforeseen shortages began to make themselves felt. So here's the sentence. There was need of paraffin oil, nails, string, dog biscuits, and iron for the horses' shoes, none of which could be produced on the farm. What about that last sentence is sketchy to you? Imagining you, there you go. No biscuits. You guys got it. No biscuits. Amanda says dog biscuits. Chanty says no biscuits, please. Dia Thrain says dog biscuits. Yeah, 100%. It stuck out, right? It's just like that other list. And Orwell wants you to find these things. You remember that other list, where Snowball was making these committees? And they're like, oh, yeah, there's going to be the egg laying committee. And there's going to be this committee. And then there's going to be the whiter wool committee. We were all like, wait a second, whiter wool? Why do we need white wool as animals? Aren't we cool with the sheep with black wool and brown wool and gray wool? Like sheep come in a lot of different varieties, right? And if we're looking for whiter wool, is that going to involve breeding at some point? But I love how the narrator just kind of skips past all these things. Oh yeah, there's this. It's just a shopping list. You know, we have shortages. We need paraffin oil, nails, string, dog biscuits, and iron for the horseshoes. Guys, these are brutal dogs. These are brutal dogs that serve only Napoleon, and we need treats for them. We need treats. It didn't say dog food, dog biscuits, something that you give as a reward. By living in an echo chamber, and I think this chapter has a lot to do with echo chambers as we kind of devolve into slogans and symbols. Um, it's like we are making for our own enslavement, right? Uh, we do things which give power to the wrong people, right? We have to go get dog biscuits, even though the dogs are the things that are kind of keeping us down. Later, there would also be need for seeds and artificial manures, besides various tools and finally the machinery for the windmill. How these were to be procured, no one was able to imagine. One Sunday morning, when the animals assembled to receive their orders, Napoleon announced that he had decided upon a new policy. From now onwards, Animal Farm would engage in trade with the neighboring farms, not, of course, for any commercial purpose, but simply in order to obtain certain materials which were urgently necessary. The needs of the windmill must override everything else, he said. He was therefore making arrangements to sell a stack of hay and part of the current year's wheat crop. And later on, if more money was needed, it would have to be made up by the sale of eggs, for which there was always a market in Willingdon. Now, hopefully, I think, and this is Orwell's way of saying this. Hopefully, you're catching on to the sketchy part of all of these lists. We're going to have to now engage the animals, the higher animals. Definitely, Napoleon is talking about engaging in trade with humans, and um, what he's willing to sell in exchange for these tools from the humans um, are hay, wheat crop, and eggs, right? Not the eggs. Remember Old Major? In Old Major's speech in chapter one, Old Major was saying to the hens, like, shouldn't these hens grow up? We're going to live in a time where there's no more sell of your eggs. You're going to be able to raise them, right? And now we have them being sold to humans who are not supposed to be dealt with. Animals aren't supposed to deal with the humans. You can just kind of see everything deteriorating still. So they have to be made up by the sale of eggs, for which there was always a market in Willingdon. Listen to this. The hens, said Napoleon, should welcome this sacrifice as their own special contribution toward the building of the windmill. Interesting the use of that word sacrifice. Okay. It appears that I am back. It appears that I am back. Okay, I'm back. You see me? I'm back. Good. Apples, apples, apples. Lord have mercy. Okay, so check it out. I'm going to blame because I need someone to blame in the spirit of Animal Farm. It wouldn't be Animal Farm if I didn't blame someone other than myself. So, guys, I am going to blame Quantum. Okay, I'm on my old internet service now, but Quantum Fiber. They came knocked on my door. They were like, "Hey, we have fiber, and it goes super super fast, and we'll let you try it for my internet just sometimes breaks down with fiber, so I'm on my old network that didn't freeze, and hopefully we're squared away at this point. Thank you guys for sticking. Thank you guys for hanging in there. All right, so we're good. We're back, and I'm on a far better stream at this point. Yeah, the pigs are trying to stop us. We won't let it happen. Okay, so we were at the sacrifice point. Napoleon said the hens should welcome this sacrifice as their own special contribution toward the building of the windmill. Once again, the animals were conscious of a vague uneasiness, never to have any dealings with human beings, never to engage in trade, never to make use of money. Had not these been amongst the earliest resolutions passed at that first triumphant meeting after Jones was expelled? All the animals remembered passing such resolutions, or at least they thought they had remembered it. The four young pigs who had protested when Napoleon abolished the meetings raised their voices timidly, but they were promptly silenced by a tremendous growling from the dogs. Then, as usual, the sheep broke into four legs good, two legs bad, and the momentary awkwardness was smoothed over. Hmm. The pigs, the porkers, the wise among them, I don't understand why they stay, right? They saw what happened to Snowball, right? So it's strange that they're just kind of becoming more timid. It's almost like it's almost like it's almost like the porkers that are still around are kind of weighing their options like, can I still get some power? Like, if I get close enough to Napoleon, can I still have some power over this? I mean, the pigs are kind of high up in the hierarchy. I mean, they don't work. So it's like it's a pretty good deal there. But it's like they're balancing, should I run? Should I leave? Or should I stay here and try to get some power? Right? Really kind of interesting. Guys, I want to ask you real quick before we continue. How's my stream? How's my stream? My stream doing a lot better? Okay, better. Perfect. Excellent. The four young pigs who had protested when Napoleon abolished the meetings raised their voices timidly, but they were promptly silenced by a tremendous growling from the dogs. Then, as usual, the sheep broke into four legs good, two legs bad, and the momentary awkwardness was smoothed over. Finally, Napoleon raised his trotter for silence and announced that he already made all the arrangements. There would be no need for any of the animals to come in contact with human beings, which would clearly be most undesirable. He intended to take the whole burden upon his own shoulders. So the narrator counts as propaganda at this point, right? Look at how lofty he makes Napoleon's agenda. He intended to take the whole burden on his own shoulders, right? Nobody wants to interact with the humans. Just put that on Napoleon's capable shoulders, and you can just relax, right? As Mr. Whymper, a solicitor living in Willingdon, had agreed to act as intermediary between Animal Farm and the outside world, and would visit the farm every Monday morning to receive his instructions. Napoleon ended his speech with his usual cry of "Long live Animal Farm," and after singing "Beast of Burden," the animals were dismissed. Beast of England, the animals were dismissed. I said Beast of Burden. That's what they are, but they sing Beast of England. Fair enough. Afterwards, Squealer made a round of the farm and set the animals' minds at rest. He assured them that the resolution against engaging in trade and using money had never been passed or even suggested. It was pure imagination, probably traceable in the beginning to lies circulated by Snowball. Look, he said that the resolution against engaging with trade with human beings, that was, that was just your imagination running away with you. Okay, let's. It's just crazy the propaganda here. I want to ask. Um, he assured them that the resolution against engaging in trade. Hang on one sec. I have to ask the oracle. What is the Overton window? Let's see what it says.
The Overton window is the range of ideas or policies that the public sees as socially acceptable or politically reasonable at any given time.
Okay, so the Overton window is what the public considers reasonable at any given time. So this shift of the Overton window, right? Um, Certain things which would have seemed wild in the beginning now seem reasonable. Guys, the Overton window is a real thing. Like it used to be the case that that it was completely absurd for a senator to curse on TV, let's say, or for someone to attack the media, or for someone to, but the Overton window slightly shifts as we see more politicians acting the same way. Our brains just want to normalize things, and so we're like, okay, well, they're just politicians being politicians, even though a decade or a couple decades ago this would have been madness. And we're seeing in this the Overton window shifting. So remember that, that phrase or that term if you're not familiar with it. The Overton window is what politicians study to determine, okay, what is going to seem radical to the majority of people, and how can I slightly shift the Overton window in my favor? A few animals still felt faintly doubtful, but Squealer asked them shrewdly, "Are you certain that this is not something that you have dreamed, comrades? Have you any record of such a resolution? Is it written down anywhere?" And since it was certainly true that nothing of the kind existed in writing, the animals were satisfied that they had been mistaken. Guys, certainty is not necessary for knowledge, right? Records are not necessary for knowledge. But he speaks with such conviction that they're just like, well, I guess, yeah, there's no records. We didn't write it down anywhere. So, I guess it didn't happen. Right? Every Monday, Mr. Whymper visited the farm, as had been arranged. He was a sly looking little man with side whiskers, a solicitor in a very small way of business, but sharp enough to have realized earlier than anyone else that Animal Farm would need a broker and that the commissions would be worth having. The animals watched his coming and going with a kind of dread and avoided him as much as possible. Nevertheless, the sight of Napoleon on all fours delivering orders to Whymper, who stood on two legs, roused their pride and partly reconciled them to the new arrangement. Guys, look at how very deep the propaganda is. When they see him, they are filled with dread just because he's on two legs. It's not about the content of his character, it's about the number of his legs. Judge not, my brothers, based on uh, the amount of legs, but by the content of his character. Okay, they are just the one who they should fear. The one who they will should rationally fear is Napoleon, right? But they're so inundated with slogans: four legs good, two legs bad, four legs good, two legs bad, that when they see this person on two legs, they're completely horrified just because of the propaganda, having nothing to know about this person besides two legs, even though they're actively being tyrannized by a four-legged pig. Their relations with the human race were now not quite the same as they had been before. The human beings did not hate Animal Farm any less now than it was prospering, any now that it less now that it was prospering. Indeed, they hated it more than ever. So the human beings did not hate Animal Farm any less now that it was prospering. Indeed, they hated it more than ever. Every human being held it as an article of faith that the farm would go bankrupt sooner or later, and above all, that the windmill would be a failure. Guys, it seems like the human beings who've been ousted from Animal Farm need a new myth, right? Uh, it's said that none of us can interact with the full content of the facts, right? There's too many facts to interact with. If we could take in all the facts about any situation, we'd be overwhelmed by the complexity of it. We'd be paralyzed by the complexity of it. So instead of looking at all the facts in a situation, we arrange facts in hierarchies so that we know which ones are relevant and which ones to ignore, right? And that's your myth, right? Your myth is how you arrange the facts, how you know which ones to ignore and which ones to pay attention to. And what's interesting is that the facts, right? Um, guys, am I still audible? Can you still hear me? Good, fantastic. um, so there's something off with their myth, right? They're treating as irrelevant relevant facts, right? Like how well Animal Farm is doing. They're treating that as irrelevant. They're trying their hardest to ignore that, right? Because they don't want their myth destroyed. They don't want the way that they organize facts to be completely obliterated. So they're ignoring things they should be paying attention to, and they're paying attention to things that they should be ignoring, right? And they're doing this just to kind of pacify themselves against the truth. So they would meet in public houses and prove to one another by means of diagrams that the windmill was bound to fall down, or that if it did stand up, then that it would never work. And yet, against their will, they had developed a certain respect for the efficiency with which the animals were managing their own affairs. One symptom of this was that they had begun to call Animal Farm by its proper name and ceased to pretend that it was called the Manor Farm. They had also dropped their championship of Jones, who had given up hope of getting his farm back and gone to live in another part of the county. Except through Whymper, there was as yet no contact between Animal Farm and the outside world. But there were constant rumors that Napoleon was about to enter into definite business agreement either with Mr. Pilkington of Foxwood or with Mr. Friedrich of Pinchfield. But never, it was noticed, with both simultaneously. Hmm. So he's kind of dealing with both of them and not telling either of them. Tactics, comrades. Remember, tactics. It was about this time that the pigs suddenly moved into the farmhouse. They moved into the farmhouse and took up their residence there. Again, the animals seemed to remember that a resolution against this had been passed in the early days, and again, Squealer was able to convince them that this was not the case. It was absolutely necessary, he said, that the pigs, who were the brains of the farm, should have a quiet place to work in. It was also more suited to the dignity of the leader, for of late he had taken to speaking of Napoleon under the title of leader. Guys, there comes a point where hierarchy no longer has to be hidden, right? They're now calling, at least the propaganda arm of Animal Farm is just calling Napoleon the leader. Even though, we're supposed to be comrades, we're all supposed to be equal, right? Now there is a definite hierarchy and he's being called a leader. Um, but when they move into the house, right, this disturbs the animals, and Squealer convinced him that it's okay. He says it's absolutely necessary that the pigs, who are the brains of the farm, should have a quiet place to work in. It was also more suited to the dignity of the leader, right? Remember that when they took the pigs, I mean, sorry, when the pigs took the apples and the milk, it wasn't about dignity, right? It was they made up something about science and the fact that this is scientifically proven that pigs need a good stable diet of apples and milk, and we need all of that because we're doing so much brain work. I mean, it was hogwash, but at the same time, it wasn't about dignity, right? It wasn't just about ego. Now they're saying, look, the pigs need to play, and we need to honor their dignity. We should honor the dignity of our leader, right? It's now kind of about pride in a real way. To live in a house than a mere sty. Nevertheless, some of the animals were disturbed when they heard that the pigs not only took their meals in the kitchen and used the drawing room as a recreational room, but also slept in the beds. Boxer passed it off as usual, with Napoleon is always right. But Clover, who thought she remembered a definite ruling against beds, went to the end of the barn and tried to puzzle out the 7 commandments which were inscribed there. Finding herself unable to read more than individual letters, she fetched Muriel. Muriel, she said, read me the 4th commandment. Does it not say something about never sleeping in a bed? With some difficulty, Muriel spelt it out. It says, no animal shall sleep in a bed with sheets, she announced finally. Curiously enough, Clover had not remembered that the 4th commandment mentioned sheets, but as it was there on the wall, it must have done so. And Squealer, who happened to be passing at this moment, attended by 2 or 3 dogs, was able to put the whole matter in its proper perspective. Guys, sometimes our brain will do the work for us, right? When you have to either deal with the fact that you're being cheated and that you have been cheated out of a lot of hard work, your brain wants to find the easy way out. And so sometimes you can unfortunately find yourself making excuses for things which don't feel right according to your intuition. You're just like, wow, that seems wrong. This seems really, really crazy. It seems really wrong. But instead of interacting with what may constitute a trauma, if you have the whole truth, sometimes we'd rather just say, you know what? That does make sense. Yep. I must have misheard. I must have misunderstood it. Right. Yeesh. Here's Squealer. You have heard then, comrades, he said, that we pigs now sleep in the beds of the farmhouses. And why not? You did not suppose, surely, that there was ever a ruling against beds. A bed merely means a place to sleep in. A pile of straw in a stall is a bed, properly regarded. The rule was against sheets, which are a human invention. We have removed the sheets from the farmhouse beds and sleep between blankets. And very comfortable beds they are, too. Wow. Do you remember when they were having a vote on, well, it wasn't really a vote at this point. Remember the birds spoke up against the slogan, 4 legs good, 2 legs bad? The birds swooped in and were like, hey, what about us? Don't we have 2 legs? And then one of the pigs said, "Well, I think that your wings should count as legs because, you don't grab with them, so they're technically not arms. You don't manipulate with them. So yeah, I mean, I'd say the birds have four legs too, right?" And they missed the opportunity there because the question is, what gives your interpretation the what gives your interpretation priority, right? And guys, it's not just about the law. It's not just about what keeps us all with the same understanding. It's who interprets these things for you. Whose interpretation do you have to buy into, right? In order to be in your group. The rule was against sheets, which are a human invention. We have removed the sheets from the farmhouse beds and sleep between blankets, and very comfortable beds they are too, but not more comfortable than we need. I can tell you, comrades, with all the brain work we have to do nowadays, you would not rob us of our repose, would you, comrades? You would not have us too tired to carry out our duties. Surely none of you wishes to see Jones back. Guys, this kind of manipulation assumes a couple of things wrongly. It assumes that beds are more needed for hard thinkers than hard workers. Like if anyone needs a nice bed, it's Boxer, right? It's like everything is for the brain of the pig. Nothing is for like the muscles of the horses or the appetites of the hens. It's all this all of this thinking work that the pigs are doing that they need all of this stuff for. And there's another really, really weird thing, this concept that if the pigs lack beds, Jones will return. If the pigs don't get all the apples on the farm, Jones will return. You don't want Jones back. If we don't get all the milk, if we share any of it with you, Jones is going to come back. You don't want Jones back, do you? Jones has just become this boogeyman. Remember, in real life, Jones has given up all hope of getting the farm back. He's moved out of the county, right? Jones now is just this symbol. He's just this scare tactic. He's this mask that just causes you to behave in the proper way, right? So look at the real Jones versus the psychological Jones, right? The psychological Jones has a lot more power. Really, really interesting stuff. You don't want Jones back. The animals reassured him on this point immediately. No more was said about the pigs sleeping in the farmhouse beds. And when some days afterwards it was announced that from now on the pigs would get up an hour later in the mornings than the other animals, no complaint was made about that either. By the autumn, the animals were tired but happy. They had had a hard year, and after the sale of part of the hay and corn, the stores of food for the winter were none too plentiful. But the windmill compensated for everything. It was almost half built now. After the harvest, there was a stretch of clear, dry weather, and the animals toiled harder than ever, thinking it well worth it, thinking it well worthwhile to plod to and fro all day with blocks of stone, if by doing so they could raise the walls another foot. Guys, I hope that you're noticing the development of a cult here, right? When you're under extremely harsh conditions, and someone is clearly violating the rules and you're under threat by like vicious dogs and yet you're happy and you're just jovial and you just like you, I can't wait to get up and just you know i- it almost kind of reminds me of cult members, right? Is if you ever seen like some of these cult documentaries, they're really really scary because sometimes they'll get a journalist who sometimes the cult leader is so impressed with his ability to have hypnotized his group that he'll let a news anchor in. And when the news anchor is interviewing the cult members, they'll just be so happy. They will be wearing like the same clothes for like 2 weeks. They'll clearly be malnourished, but they're just their expressions are just like, "Oh, the leader gives us so much hope. He's so wonderful. He's just so I can't imagine not being here." Um really 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 interesting. Um so the It was almost half built, the windmill. After the harvest, there was a stretch of clear, dry weather, and the animals toiled harder than ever, thinking it well worth while to plod to and fro all day with blocks of stone, if by doing so they could raise the walls another foot. Boxer would even come out at nights and work for an hour or two on his own by the light of the harvest moon. In their spare moments, the animals would walk round and round the half finished mill, admiring the strength and perpendicularity of its walls, and marveling that they should ever have been able to build anything so imposing. Only old Benjamin refused to grow enthusiastic about the windmill, though, as usual, he would utter nothing beyond the cryptic remark that donkeys live a long time. Remember Benjamin's slogan? Donkeys live a long time. None of you have ever seen a dead donkey, right? I think the first time he said that, we took it to mean uh, the reason he's not happy is because he's been through this phase before. He knows where it leads. For some reason, he's unable to express to the others where it leads to. Yeah, CG Hearn says Benjamin Gang. Yeah. we need hats that say I'm Benjamin. I don't know. I don't know whether you want to be Benjamin or not, right? I mean, he knows a thing or two, but his outlook is very, very dreary. November came with raging southwest winds. Building had to stop because it was now too wet to mix the cement. Finally, there came a night when the gale was so violent that the farm buildings rocked on their foundations, and several tiles were blown off the roof of the barn. The hens woke up squawking with terror because they had all dreamed simultaneously of hearing a gun go off in the distance. Still with me? Just doing a check in. Thumbs up, thumbs up, apples up, milk up. Yep, still good. Perfect. The hens woke up squawking with terror because they had all dreamed simultaneously of hearing a gun go off in the distance. In the morning, the animals came out of their stalls to find that the flagstaff had been blown down and an elm tree at the foot of the orchard had been plucked up like a radish. Something else I wanted to just throw in there, guys. The hens are waking up in terror because of bad dreams. Does this give any implication of the level of psychological terror that they're under? Right? I mean, the leadership on Animal Farm are just playing psychological games all day, right? Um, Changing the rules, confusing their mind. It's like, oh yeah, and gaslighting everybody. I love the ones of you who mention gaslighting. It's like you don't really remember that. Snowball wasn't a hero; he was actually against you. So go, what do you mean? There was no law against beds. The law was against sheets. You know, all of this gaslighting, causing you to uh, believe that your mind is way more fallible and that you're way crazier than you think you are. Um, and the psychological terror has such deep roots that the hens are now waking up in terror thinking that Jones is back. Even though in reality, Jones is far gone. Jones has given up, right? The only Jones is the spirit that inhabits Napoleon at this point. In the morning, the animals came out of their stalls to find that the flagstaff had been blown down and that an elm tree at the foot of the orchard had been plucked up like a radish. They had just noticed this when a cry of despair broke from every animal's throat. A terrible sight had met their eyes. The windmill was in ruins. Remember when we said that the windmill represented the prosperity of the animals, at least under Snowball? And there was this creepy line in chapter 5 where it said Napoleon was against the windmill the entire time. I think George Orwell meant for us to see the shallow rendering, but also the deep meaning. That since the windmill represents the prosperity of all the animals, Napoleon being against the windmill means that he's only out for himself, right? And now look, the windmill is in ruins, right? That should also be thought of as symbolic. This is an opportunity to recognize the futility of this entire project, right? This is an opportunity for reflection. This is a moment of silence. With one accord, they dashed down to the spot. Napoleon, who seldom moved out of a walk, raced ahead of them all. Yes, there it lay, the fruit of all their struggles, leveled to its foundations. The stones they had broken and carried so laboriously, scattered all around. Unable at first to speak, they stood gazing mournfully at the litter of fallen stone. Napoleon paced to and fro in silence, occasionally snuffing at the ground. Guys, listen. Okay, I have to ask this. Respond to me in the chat. Do you think the windmill would have been in ruins if Snowball had been in charge of building it? The person who was detailing the plans in the flow state, the pig that was really like, I want this to be done. I'm so happy. He's like, we're all gonna do so much better. I want you guys to eventually read, right? It's almost like because the plans went to someone who didn't really have love for the plans, like when someone is trying to do something for their own gain, aren't they skipping steps? Right? Don't they? Isn't the result more important than the process, according to them? Think about that. Like whenever you want to do something for selfish reasons, it's done clumsily, right? For the most part, usually. I mean, I know you have an evil genius sometimes that like works out the details of their plans, but I mean, someone like Hitler didn't even listen to his generals. He was so arrogant that there were times where and of course, check me on this, but there were opportunities that they had to know Hitler's whereabouts and get rid of Hitler, but they were kind of afraid sometimes because Hitler's generals were so much more competent than he was. Some of the generals who Hitler just got paranoid about and stopped listening to would have maybe done a better job, destroying or taking over the world than even him. Um, but with one accord, they dashed down to the spot. Napoleon, who seldom moved out of a walk, raced ahead of them all. Yes, there it lay, the fruit of all their struggles leveled to its foundations. Unable to speak at first, they stood gazing mournfully at the litter of fallen stone. Napoleon paced to and fro in silence, occasionally snuffing at the ground. His tail had grown rigid and twitched sharply from side to side, a sign in him of intense mental activity. Suddenly, he halted, as though his mind were made up. Comrades, he said quietly, do you know who is responsible for this? Do you know the enemy who has come in the night and overthrown our windmill? Snowball, he suddenly roared in a voice of thunder. Snowball has done this thing. In sheer malignity, thinking to set back our plans and avenge himself for his ignominious expulsion, this traitor has crept here under cover of night and destroyed our work of nearly a year. Comrades, here and now I pronounce the death sentence upon Snowball, animal hero second class, and half a bushel of apples to any animal who brings him to justice, a full bushel to anyone who captures him alive. Meritorious manumission. Meritorious manumission. Uh, Meritorious manumission was slave law, right? It was if a slave would do something to make the master rich, he would be given something like a bushel of apples. Maybe he'd be given a couple days off. Maybe he'd be given a beer, right? A new pair of Brogaines. um, if the slave if the slave made some invention to get the master rich, if the slave saved the master's life, he might in some instances get his freedom, or at least get elected from field slave to house slave. If a slave told on another slave, like if a slave was hearing rumors that another slave wanted to run off in the middle of the night, and then you come up to the masters and you say, hey, this guy's planning to run, make sure you get him and teach him a lesson, type of thing. That kind of activity could get you rewards as well. This is called the meritorious manumission process. And it seems like it's beginning here. What's interesting is that the beginning of the chapter says they were working like slaves. And then the end of the chapter, Napoleon is like, I'll give a bushel of apples to whoever captures Snowball so we can kill him. It's a meritorious manumission, right? It's like whoever can empower me by doing my bidding, I'll give you something that you used to have for free. Apples used to just be their diet, guys. They used to just eat this. This used to be theirs. And now it's being given as a reward for killing somebody, for uh helping someone, with their death sentence. Crazy. Okay. So, a full bushel to anyone who captures him alive. The animals were shocked beyond measure to learn that even Snowball could be guilty of such an action. There was a cry of indignation, and everyone began thinking out ways of catching Snowball if he should ever come back. Almost immediately, the footprints of a pig were discovered in the grass at a little distance from the knoll. They could only be traced for a few yards, but appeared to lead to a hole in the hedge. Napoleon snuffed deeply at them and pronounced them to be snowballs. He gave it as his opinion that Snowball had probably come from the direction of Foxwood Farm. No more delays, comrades, cried Napoleon when the footprints had been examined. There is work to be done. This very morning we begin rebuilding the windmill, and we will build all through the winter, rain or shine. We will teach this miserable traitor that he cannot undo our work so easily. Remember, comrades, there must be no alteration in our plans. They shall be carried out to the day. Forward, comrades. Long live the windmill. Long live Animal Farm. That's the end of the chapter. I have a question for you, and I'm writing it down in my book. Guys, did Napoleon destroy the windmill, in your opinion? Or did it fall as the result of his incompetence as a leader? Because on the one hand, I want to say that Napoleon destroyed it himself just to see how much power he actually has. Sometimes sick tyrants will just do that. Will just say, I want to see who's going to test me if I knock this thing over and start you over from the very beginning. I want to see who has the balls to stand up to me so that I can make another example out of somebody. Sometimes tyrants will do things like that. However, I am convinced that because of he's like, oh, it's going to take this long, and it's going to because of all the setbacks that they have. He's just not as smart as Napoleon. So there's a part. I mean, sorry, Napoleon's not as smart as Snowball. So there's a part of me that wants to say it's just his incompetence. This thing was made to fall. He doesn't care. He doesn't care about the animals. He doesn't care about their nourishment. He's taking off their rations. He's overworking them. He's working them on Sundays now, right? He's confusing their minds with all these rules and threatening them with Jones. So, there's a part of me that wants to say it fell down because the leaders don't care. Ron says it fell by incompetence. Brenda says he is incompetent and blaming Snowball. Shanti says both. Could it be both? That it was poorly done, and evidently poorly done because of the fact that and he knocked it over out of anger. It could be both. And guys, it's strategic either way, right? It's like It's possible that he knocked this thing down to have something to blame Napoleon for, to blame Snowball for, and to say, look, can I actually pass a death sentence on an animal? Do I have that much control at this point? It's just kind of asking the question, like, we're in the house, we're laying on beds, we've told them that the whole thing is sheets, and they're buying into all that. Let's just do a test to see how much control we actually have. Can I knock over all their work, blame Snowball, and then pass a death sentence on him with no vote? Maybe it's just testing to see how much power he has. So I'm writing this down in my book. Option one, Napoleon destroyed the windmill to test his power. And number two, the windmill fell due to Napoleon's incompetence and the exhaustion of the animals. You guys remember when Scar took over the Pride Lands? um, and you get kind of a look at Scar's at how the Pride Lands look now that Scars, and you just see like bones. Everything's kind of gray. All the animals are malnourished, including Scar, including the henchmen of Scar. It's like when evil takes over, it doesn't even have the best intentions of the evildoer in mind. Right? I mean, you might think that the evil person is benefiting him or herself, but it's a very, very cognitively limited state. It's the reason that the throne of kings was a back against a wall with a guard sitting there and a guard sitting there. When you approach the king, you have to approach with your hands up and then put your face to the ground. This is to show that you have no weapons, right? Kings are very, very, very paranoid, right? Um, Jolie said, "How's the Discord? Any news?" The Discord is going to be available this week. This week. Everyone in the chat will work Sundays for the Discord. But no, yes, the Discord will be, in all seriousness, it'll be available this week. Yes, indeed. My wife and I are going to have a fun today because we're going to go on the Discord. We're just going to make sure she's going to be the guinea pig in the Discord server, and it's basically all set up. So that is going to be phenomenal. That is going to be phenomenal. Mighty Mouse upgraded membership to Epiphany member. Goth Liar upgraded membership to Epiphany member. I deeply appreciate that. $20 super chat from Amy F. What was the Epiphany thing you were talking about? What was the Epiphany thing you were talking about? I wonder what you mean, Amy. If you wouldn't mind just diving a little bit deeper into that. Lauren, thank you so much for the super chat. Apples and milk, thank you. Roofs, another super chat just came in. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I deeply appreciate it, guys. I appreciate the fan funding. It allows me to continue doing what I'm doing. And man, 1984, I'm so amped to get into that book. And that one is like 3 times as large. Like my 1984 just came in today, and it's 3 times as thick as this. So it's like we're going to be in 1984 for a little bit. Kat, welcome as an Insight member. Thank you so much. I deeply appreciate that. Belle says, I absolutely love you, Mr. Biscuit. Let's all give each other a hug. So glad to have you all. I love you too. And by love, I mean the felt recognition of our shared being. 100% love you guys. Absolutely. Absolutely. Emily says, Mr. Biscuit, I love this so much. It's so weird. I started it's called Wisdom School, and we meet at the Hilliard Library every other Sunday. And We have conversations. I mean, the next conversation we're having is next Sunday, and we talk about control. We talk about well, next Sunday we're having a conversation about how do you know what you can and can't control? Because in Stoic philosophy, wisdom is knowing the difference between what you can and cannot control. So we're asking ourselves, like, how do we know what's in our control and what's not? What is the worst problem for your society? Too many people thinking that they can control what they can't, or too many people who don't know what they can control, right? And it's like you can have it's a subtle difference if you know the majority of your community leans in one or the other direction regarding that problem. Liliana says we can only control ourselves. And to a degree, yeah. Let me see. I am hoping I want to get because there was that super chat. Amy said, "What was the epiphany thing you were talking about?" And I'm wondering, hopefully she's still here and she can ask that again because I'm not sure what that means. If Amy is still around. Yeah. Um, but an insight is it's an aha moment. It's it's like, oh, you know, it gives you the ability to see a problem in a way that you hadn't seen it before, which usually helps you solve it. Um, an epiphany is like a rearranging of your salience landscape. I think an epiphany happens when your motivated expectations align with reality to such an amazing degree. It's like a it's you're never you're not even the same after an epiphany. It's almost like a transformation. Mel says that was at the beginning of the stream. Yeah, I know. And I'm wondering, like, should I? Because whenever super chats come in, I definitely want to get to them, but I also don't want to disrupt the experience with the reading too much, and so I usually leave them to the end. Maybe I should just read them out, you know, right as they come. Patty says it's always nice to see that there are so many people who are not stuck in left or right extremism, but in logical thinking and objective observation. Yeah, 100%. I was blessed before I really started getting serious about this channel, guys. I was blessed to work in a job where my job was essentially to sit down with homeowners and talk to them about their windows, roofs, gutters, windows, uh, you know, baths, you know, and I would sit down with people on the far right and the far left and have incredible times and incredible conversations and make incredible friendships with both sides. And so that led me to believe, like, oh, wait a second. I was afraid of the world, not because the world is scary, but because the algorithm responds to my fear and my hatred and my anger. I mean, remember, the algorithm wants you to stay engaged as long as possible. The algorithm, the only thing the algorithm cares about is user engagement. Stay engaged, stay engaged. And so, what causes us to stay engaged longest? Anger, fear, um, and sex, right? But mostly anger and fear. And so, what you see on the news, what you see on the media, it's going to be inflated, it's going to be exaggerated, things are going to be omitted because they want long term engagement. Right, when everything is fine, we start to ask deep questions, we start to get into insights and epiphanies, right? um, but it was just such a blessing being able to sit down with people as my career last year. um, and yeah, I got to see far left and far right in real time, and they're not as different as they think they are because of the media. Right, the media will have you thinking that the other side are complete monsters. But guys, it is 2:30 for the sake of the stream. I'm gonna close this one down. But yeah, Discord is coming this week. Thank you for rocking with me, guys.